My wife cheated for 13 years while I raised our kids and paid every bill, so I made her watch me leave and never looked back. 2 years have passed. I'm a man in my mid-40s now, and my ex-wife is 2 years younger. We have 3 children too. Of them are technically adults, so we only need to co-parent for about 3 more years with our youngest. My ex and I had been together since the late 1990s, married in our early 20s. For my part, I considered us happily married until around 2017. When I began to notice her pulling away emotionally at the time our middle child was struggling with severe depression and even began having self-destructive thoughts, I assumed that was the cause of her distance. I was okay with us both focusing fully on our child's mental health. I believed our marriage was strong enough to weather a few difficult years where intimacy and quality time as a couple had to take a back seat. Here's the timeline of the affair. In 2008, Facebook exploded in popularity, and like many others, I added almost everyone I had ever met. I had close to 2,000 friends at one point. That same summer, my ex added an old boyfriend on Facebook, the one she had dated when she was 17 and he was nearly 23, just about a year before she and I met. He had ghosted her back then, likely cheated on her, and that's how their relationship had ended. After reconnecting online, they began chatting and decided to meet in person. That led to them hooking up 2 or 3 times a week over a span of 6 to 7 months. From the last few months of 2008 into early 2009, they would meet during the day at my ex-mother-in-law's house and sleep together in the spare bedroom. At the time, my ex was working toward her bachelor's degree, and I was the sole breadwinner, supporting the entire household so she could focus on school and the family. We had 3 young children then. I've had all of them DNA tested. They are all biologically mine. I did notice my ex acting distant during that period, but it also coincided with the 2008 financial crisis. I lost my job, and I chalked up her withdrawal to the stress of our situation and her possible disappointment in me. Despite that, I've always been careful with money, and thanks to our savings, I was able to find another job quickly. In hindsight, the job loss was a small bump in the road, but at the time, it felt overwhelming. I assumed that's why she seemed emotionally removed. Eventually, the affair fizzled out. Her affair partner AP was in a relationship too and had kids of his own. He wanted to leave his wife and pushed my wife to leave me, but she refused. They continued talking on and off from 2011 to 2013. In the summer of 2013, they met again. This time, they had sex in the front seat of his car with 2 children's car seats in the back. Stay classy, right? After that, they had no contact until 2017. That spring, the AP reached out to her again, claiming he was getting divorced and wanted to know her relationship status. That was a lie. I later spoke to the other betrayed spouse OBS, and he wasn't getting divorced. I suspect he was just testing the waters to see if he could monkey branch from his current partner to mine and wasn't going to jump until he knew she was available. Of course, my ex jumped right in. From 2017 to 2020, they met up a handful of times each year, maybe 2 to 5 times annually. The AP lived about 2 hours away, and back in 2008-2009, he worked as a truck driver, which is how they were able to meet so often back then. He passed through our town almost daily. During the renewed affair, my ex would make up stories, mostly about weekend getaways with her friends. I believed her. I had no reason not to. I took trips with my own friends once or twice a year. So I figured she was just doing the same when she was away. I'd make it special for the kids, ordering food, movie nights, staying up late. I genuinely believed we had a balanced life. Then came 2021. She kicked off the year by going out of town in January, then again in mid-March, and once more in late March. On April 1st, of all days, she returned and told me she wanted a divorce. She said she still loved me, but wasn't in love with me anymore. She listed all my flaws. Then said she hadn't been happy for a long time. All that tired nonsense, I'm not happy. I still love you, but I'm not in love with you. It's like all cheaters read from the same damn script. I don't know where they get this playbook, but somehow they all seem to have a copy. I see it every time I read about cheating stories on Reddit or anywhere else. It's always the same lines. At the time, I was shattered. But instead of reacting with anger, I immediately started working on myself. I genuinely believed I was the problem. I was gaslit into thinking our marriage had crumbled because of my flaws. I was in therapy within 10 days. Normally, it takes weeks to get a first appointment, but I called every therapist I could find until I landed one. I took full responsibility for the state of our marriage and did everything I could to fix it. She claimed she needed space and started going away every other weekend during April, May, and June. I believed her. I bought the lie that she needed time to think. But of course, those just happened to be the weekends when the AP didn't have his kids. She was driving 2 hours to spend the weekend at his place. During that time, I kept asking what she wanted if she was ready to separate or work things out. She said she still didn't know. I even offered multiple times to sign the divorce papers. She had printed them out back in April and kept them sticking out of her purse just enough so I'd see them whenever I left the house. It felt like a cruel game. I told her calmly that I understood if she wanted a divorce. I said I didn't want to be with someone who didn't want to be with me. But she kept stringing me along, offering crumbs of hopes. I kept trying. I became a complete doormat. Then July 2021 rolled around. She told me she wanted to give our marriage another shot. I was hopeful. Around mid-July, I had an ultramarathon out of town. I thought maybe she'd surprise me at the finish line. That thought helped get me through that brutal race. I got back home the next day, sore and exhausted, only to find she wasn't home. My kids took care of me grocery shopping, making dinner, bringing me ice packs. My wife finally came home late that night. What she didn't tell me was that she'd spent the night at the AP's place. A few weeks later, in early August, she did it again. I took our 2 younger kids to visit my sister, out of town on a Friday. She said she wanted to spend time with our oldest that evening. But she lied to both of us. She had the AP pick her up, stayed the night with him, came back the next day, and then drove our oldest to meet us acting like nothing happened. We had 2 cars, so it wasn't suspicious on the surface. In my August, the AP went on his own weekend trip, so she didn't see him that time. But later that month, she had a medical emergency and had to spend 2 nights in the hospital. Naturally, I handled everything. I brought her everything she asked for and even things she didn't, but instead of being grateful, she got mad while grabbing something from her purse, which she specifically asked me to get. I spotted those same damn divorce papers again. I hadn't seen them since early July. I calmly asked why she still had them. She got defensive instead of answering, and then she still went to see him. Late August, she convinced her mom to go with her on a trip to visit her aunt, who happened to live in the same city as the AP. My ex snuck out of the hotel both nights to sleep with him. So now, she wasn't just hiding it from me, she was hiding it from her own mother too. She continued seeing him in early September, just days after our wedding anniversary. That was the final straw. I was no longer guessing, I knew. When she returned home on September 12th, I confronted her. She admitted to part of it, just the tip of the iceberg. Classic trickle truth. Just like the reconciliation subreddits on Reddit describe. I asked her directly who she wanted, me or him. She said she wanted me. But then she kept sending him short Snapchats behind my back. When I called her out, she said she needed time to end it and that she wanted to do it in person. She convinced me she had to meet him face to face to end it cleanly. So, she drove to meet him halfway in a town about an hour away allegedly to break it off in person. At that point, I still believed the affair was just starting up again. So, in 2021, like a fool, I agreed to let her end things with him in person. I honestly believed she'd do the right thing. She met up with him on September 25th, but instead of breaking it off, they went for a drive, made out, and she was the one who suggested getting a hotel room to sleep together. But he wanted to go back to his house, cheap bastard. Thankfully, we had location sharing turned on at the time, so she couldn't get away with that. Instead, while driving around, she performed oral on him. To this day, I still don't believe they didn't sleep together that night, but honestly, at this point, it hardly matters. Stay classy, right? Asterisk, she finally sent him a breakup message on October 19th. I remember the date so clearly because every single day during those 5 weeks and 2 days felt like dying inside. That pain doesn't leave you. I created my Reddit account in November 2021. My first post was before I spoke to the AP's wife, and my second was right after I called and spoke with her and learned even more of the truth. The rest of 2021, I was still clinging desperately to the hope of reconciliation. I was a mess. We saw 3 marriage counselors. The first one, during summer 2021, was a waste of time. My ex hadn't confessed to the cheating yet, so, of course, everything got blamed on me. The next 2 weren't any better. They tried to split the blame, which I now see is a lazy and common strategy among marriage counselors. I don't trust that approach anymore. I walked into those sessions clearly broken, and instead of support, was told all the things I'd done wrong in the marriage, as if I was equally responsible for the whole collapse. The truth is, I've always been a good communicator. I don't keep secrets. If I need something, I say it. If I'm upset, I speak up. Of course, I wasn't perfect, no one is. I worked a lot, spent time with friends and family, and admittedly, only did about a third of the household chores. That part was unfair to my ex. I also started getting angry more often, maybe once or twice a year in 2017, escalating to 6 to 8 times in 2020. I was frustrated. I could feel her pulling away, and every time I brought it up, she'd deflect or say there was nothing wrong. But I knew something was off. I shouldn't have raised my voice, I know that. But if you've ever been gaslit, you'll understand how maddening it is. Sometimes, yelling felt like the only way I'd be heard. In therapy, I learned I default to fight mode under stress. Fight, flight, or fawn. I fight because it gives me a false sense of control, makes me feel big when I feel small. But my ex, she never once came to me with a concern. Never said a word about being unhappy. So by the time we were sitting with a counselor, I was already in shock. I didn't need to be told I shared equal responsibility. My wife detonated our marriage all by herself. This is getting long and, honestly, writing all of this is bringing back waves of emotion. I think it's a good place to stop for now, since it covers the entire affair timeline. I'll post again later, maybe today. Maybe in the next couple of days with what happened afterward and where I am now. This will probably be my last post on Reddit. I don't use it much anymore, especially not the infidelity subs. At some point, it just starts to feel like pain shopping. I want to move on. D-Day was September 12, 2021. By October and early November, I started opening up to people, told my parents and siblings about my wife's affair. My brother initially seemed supportive. He and my sister-in-law had gotten together after she cheated on her husband back in 2010 or 2011. I was never totally sure if it was an affair. My brother had been single at the time, and they never talked much about it, but there were always rumors. I asked my brother if I could talk to my sister-in-law about it, to try and understand what was going through my wife's head. He gave me the green light. So I spoke with her, but only after getting his permission. Turns out, my brother had almost forgotten their own situation had even been an affair. My sister-in-law, however, confirmed it and offered some insight into the mindset my ex-wife might have had. Christmas 2021 rolled around, and we spent it together, but it was incredibly hard for me. My birthday is also in December, and I remember crying when I received presents from my kids both on my birthday and on Christmas. At that point, I couldn't even believe anyone truly cared about me. I felt hollow inside. New Year's came, and I had no desire to celebrate. At midnight, we stood out on the balcony watching the fireworks, and I got completely triggered. Just 1 year earlier, my ex had stood on the same balcony by my side, but secretly sent a Snapchat video to her affair partner while I was standing right there next to her. 2022 began slowly, as it usually does. I'm a professor, so once I finish grading exams and papers, I usually get about 10 to 12 days of downtime before the spring semester kicks off in full swing by mid-January. Around mid-January, we were at my parents' house for dinner. My brother, his wife, their kids, and my parents were all there. This was only about 4 months after D-Day, and I was suffering from what I now know was undiagnosed PTSD. That's not an excuse, but it is some context for where my headspace was at the time. My mom started telling some random story that didn't make any sense, and it set me off. I got irritated and started an argument. I take full responsibility for that tie. Absolutely regret it. But at the time, I'd been having so many frustrating conversations with my ex. She'd say things that didn't add up, and I was constantly feeling dismissed. My mom's story just hit that nerve and pushed me over the edge. I wasn't shouting, but it was obvious I was annoyed. Suddenly, my younger brother stood up and started yelling at me. I stood up too, walked toward the front door, and put on my coat. But then I thought, no, I want to settle this now. So I turned back, went in, and yelled at him things like, "What the hell, man?" He got up again and shoved me out the front door. I didn't fight back. I just let him push me. We're both tall and strong, and a full-blown fight could have ended badly. I had zero interest in going there. To be perfectly clear, I started the argument. I own that. I walked home. It took about 45 minutes. It gave me time to cool off. That same evening, I called my mom to apologize. Later, I got a text from my brother. He said he was sorry and wanted to talk. I responded that I accepted his apology and understood that people lose their tempers, but told him he should call me so we could actually talk it out. That was the last time I heard from him until November 22. 2 months passed with no word. Aside from a few short, shallow phone calls from my mother, I didn't hear from anyone in the family. In mid-March, it was my mom's birthday. She and my dad went away for a weekend trip. While on a hike, my dad slipped and took a bad fall. He broke a few ribs and suffered a fracture in his C5 vertebrae. So he had to spend the night in the hospital. My mom called me around 10:30 p.m. that night. She told me what happened, and I insisted on driving over to help about a 1-hour drive. I didn't want her driving home in the dark, especially while upset. My parents are in their late 60s, not elderly, but not young either, and I didn't want her risking an accident. On the drive back, she asked how I was doing. I told her the truth. Not well at all. I was severely depressed. I was having self-destructive thoughts. And earlier that same week, I'd gone to get an STD test. My ex had just admitted that she'd had unprotected sex with her affair partner, including anal, without any protection. It was humiliating. Going to an STD clinic at my age, after thinking I'd been in a monogamous, safe relationship for decades. It was gut-wrenching. I hadn't slept with anyone other than my wife since the late 1990s. My mother's response? Well, that's just what people do when they're having an affair. That hit like a punch to the stomach. She's always been like that, making excuses for others, guilt-tripping, always telling you someone has it worse just to silence your pain. I couldn't believe how dismissive she was. I changed the subject to keep myself from losing it again. Then, at the end of March, my brother sent an email not to me, but to my wife. In it, he claimed he was worried about her and our kids. He accused me of being abusive and urged her to leave me. He said he was there for her and the kids and would support them. My wife didn't show me the email right away. It took her a week or 10 days. When she finally did, I insisted she respond and shut that nonsense down. She eventually did, but only about a month later, in late April. Then, in mid-May 2022, my brother doubled down and sent a second email. She finally replied to his second email about 2 weeks later, firmly refuting his accusations. But by mid-June, he sent her a third email, dumbing down, or rather, tripling down. In it, he called me controlling, dismissed my self-destructive thoughts as attention-seeking, and tried once again to convince her to leave me. This time, she responded assertively, calling his accusations absolute crap. She even admitted that if anyone was abusing anyone, it was her mistreating me. She showed me all the emails, and all I ever did was insist she'd tell him the truth in her responses. I know how this all sounds, but truly it was absolute garbage. I'll explain why. I'm 6 years older than my brother. And yes, when we were kids, I was mean to him sometimes. I remember holding him down and pretending to spit on him, doing the whole loogie thing. I gave him a couple of backhand shots to the groin, wedgies, that kind of stuff. It wasn't okay, and he definitely deserves an apology for it. But I was around 12 to 14 at the time, and he was maybe 6 to 8. I moved out when I was 20, as a teenager. I didn't want to hang out with a much younger sibling. It was immature. Big brother behavior standard stuff for the late 80s and early 90s. Again, not excusing it, but I'm not pretending it didn't happen either. Then, in late April, I had a heated phone call with my mother. She started in with her usual criticisms, saying I was always rude, making excuses for my wife, and twisting everything. In one breath, she said, "If your father talked about me the way you talk about your wife, I'd divorce him on the spot." Mind you, I wasn't trashing my ex-I, was just telling my mom the facts of what she'd done. And then, in the very next sentence, she said, "I don't understand why you're still married to that woman." She also accused me of self-diagnosing PTSD and depression because I hadn't been evaluated by a clinical psychologist yet. I ended that call by hanging up. That night, I wrote a long email explaining that I couldn't have that kind of toxic communication with her anymore. I told her that if she couldn't be supportive, I'd have to go no contact. I gave her 3 simple rules I expected from anyone in the family who knew about the affair. Support both me and my ex, whether we reconcile or divorce. Don't excuse what my ex did. It wasn't a mistake. It was a conscious betrayal. Understand that I'm dealing with trauma, depression, and dark thoughts. Respect that, and don't minimize it. Meanwhile, my ex and I were still attempting to reconcile. In mid-May, we took a 5-day trip to a well-known city in Southern Europe. On the second night, we had a few cocktails for each, nothing wild, just enough to loosen us up at dinner and a bar afterward. That's when she slipped up. She admitted she had seen the AP twice in 2018. Up until that moment, she'd sworn it was only once that year. Everything fell apart again. I booked a separate hotel room in the same hotel and told her I wanted a divorce. It had been 8 months of trickle truth at that point, and every time she opened her mouth, it felt like I was back to square one. The next day, we talked and agreed to finish the trip. She promised again that she would finally give me a full, honest timeline. A couple of days after we got back, she did. Turns out it wasn't twice, it was 5 times in 2018. And like a teenager, she had drawn effing hearts in her planner. On the days she saw him, I literally felt sick to my stomach when I saw that, By then, I was confident the affair itself was over and had been since September 2021. I hated it. But I checked her phone regularly. I'm way more tech-savvy than she is, so I knew exactly what to look for. She had always known my PIN, and we shared location services on our devices. I hated the feeling. Made me feel like her parole officer, but it was the only way I could keep my sanity. Even with all that, I felt like I was disappearing. Like a tree that had lost all its leaves in the fall, and no one would realize it was dead until nothing bloomed again in spring. I was in complete emotional shock. I felt hyper-aware of everything, constantly on edge, and couldn't make sense of what had happened to my life. By June, my ex was still dragging her feet on everything I asked. One thing in particular cut deep: the fold-out couch. It was still at her mother's house, the same one they used to sleep together on during the affair. Our kids had slept on that couch during overnight visits. I had asked her multiple times to get rid of it. She kept making excuses until she finally admitted she'd just forgotten again and again. I think my ex is a world-class compartmentalizer. She can tuck her thoughts into tidy little drawers in her mind and pretend they don't exist. She was also dragging her feet in therapy. She only went to individual counseling about once every 3 to 4 weeks. Then, her therapist announced she was taking a 2-month summer vacation. I asked my wife if she seriously thought that was enough to unpack and untangle all the mental knots she had going on. I insisted she find someone else to see more frequently, at least 2 or 3 times a month, if not weekly. Around that time, I started EMDR therapy after trying several other therapists. It finally began to help with the trauma. I'd already been on antidepressants since June 2021, and still am. But my wife never wanted to talk about the affair. She tried to rug sweep everything, acting like it was all in the past, and I just needed to get over it. I told her that's not how this works. I can't just flip a switch and move on. Need to process it, to see her truly take ownership of what she did, to work on herself and show real change if we were ever going to have a future. Every time I brought it up, she got defensive. She'd blame something else, make excuses, or delay whatever it was I had asked her to do. Simple things like replacing that cursed fold-out couch, sticking with therapy, reading books or articles on infidelity, initiating date nights, socializing with other couples. She left all of it to me. It felt like I was doing all the work, emotionally and practically. Eventually, I got fed up and asked her to move out at the end of June 2022. She did, because her mom had a spare bedroom and it wouldn't have been fair for me to be the one to leave. I still gave her space with the kids, went away a few days a month so she could be home with them. And she came by regularly to pick up things and have dinner with the kids while I went out with friends. Soon after she moved out, she got a call from my mother. The same mother who hadn't spoken to me since April and never replied to the email I sent with the 3 clear boundaries I asked her to respect. My ex was at work when the call came in, so she missed it. But then my mother called my ex's mother and spoke to her instead. She told my ex-mother-in-law that she loved and supported my ex, and if there was anything she could do for her, she'd be there. These 2 women had no real relationship. My mother might invite her to dinner once a year. That tanned always when we were there too. They'd never had a private bond. Then in July 2022, I got a phone call from my dad. At first, he sounded understanding. But when I started expressing how betrayed I felt by my brother, he cut me off and said, "You do realize you're talking about my son, right?" My heart sank. I ended the call soon after that. After everything I'd been through, I began to see patterns. My ex, she's almost textbook borderline personality disorder, or at least somewhere in that realm. My mother ticks nearly every box for a covert narcissist. And my younger brother, he's the golden child. Always has been. He's messed up in countless ways, but still treated like the family jewel. He's an alcoholic, was abusing prescription meds in his late teens, couldn't hold a job, and had to be dragged out of a couple of drug dens by my mother in the early 2000s. I never even knew about that. I'd already moved out by then, and no one told me. If they had, I would have been there to help. He still can't hold down a job. My parents own 50% of his and my sister-in-law's house. When they were buying it, my father asked me and my sister if we were okay with it. He wanted our blessing. I said, of course, within 6 seconds. They were living in a cramped 3-bedroom apartment at the time, which, surprise, surprise, was owned by her mother. I didn't even know that until much later. Basically, my brother has always been handed everything. Always had someone make excuses for him. Meanwhile, I've always been stable, responsible, educated. I've had my life together. Looking back, I think my brother has always been jealous of me. He just hid it well. Then, when I was at my lowest, he took the opportunity to kick me while I was down. And honestly, it's the fact that he was the affair partner in his own relationship, stealing another man's wife, probably made him feel more sympathetic toward the AP in my situation. In his mind, I must have done something to deserve being cheated on. Since she cheated on me, my brother has been completely cold. The only time he reached out was in November. He happened to drive past me while I was walking the dog. He smiled and waved at me like nothing had ever happened, so I flipped him off. An hour later, he called furious. I didn't say much, just asked if he thought he owed me an apology for betraying me. He laughed at me. I hung up. That was the last time we spoke. I haven't seen my mother since her birthday in March 2022, my father since April 2022, or my brother since January 2022 in mid-November 2022. I sent my parents a long, detailed email explaining how hurt I felt and why. I told them that unless they sincerely apologized, I needed to go no contact with them at least until spring 2023. They never replied. But oddly, they did start showing up at the gym I went to. I had invited them there multiple times over the years because I'm very fit and wanted to help them stay healthy and also just spend time together, but they always declined. Now, suddenly, they started popping up there, so I switched gyms entirely in March 2023. I sent them another email saying the same thing: why I was hurt, why I needed space. Their only reply was 2 sentences: that they loved me. That was it. A flat, dismissive response to a heartfelt, painful email about as long as this post. About 3 weeks ago, I made a Facebook post. It was about depression and suicidal thoughts, but not a cry for help. What prompted it was a man my age in our area who had taken his own life after losing his job in a very public and humiliating way. The post was about being open, honest about these feelings. I encouraged others to talk about it, to reach out if they ever felt that way. I said I'd be there for anyone going through something similar. That same evening, I got a phone call from my father, the first time I'd heard from him in 9 months. He said he was very worried about me and wanted to drive me to an emergency mental facility to have me committed. I told him flat out that I didn't believe he was genuinely concerned. I had told him multiple times back in the fall of 2021 and again in 2022 that I was depressed and struggling, and he brushed it off every time. The fact that he hadn't spoken to me in 9 months said everything. He got defensive. Said I was calling him a liar. Kai told him I don't listen to words anymore, look at actions. And his actions showed me judgment, not support. I told him I would never treat my children the way he treated me. I asked him what he thought about the emails I'd sent, and he called them nonsense. That cut deep. I told him how painful it was to bare my soul and have him dismiss it as nonsense. I ended the conversation shortly after. I haven't heard from him since, and for anyone who might still doubt whether I was ever abusive or controlling, let me tell you how I acted during this entire mess. When my wife asked for a divorce on April 1st, 2021, I didn't yell. Lash out. I told her calmly that if she wanted a divorce, she'd get one. I cried. I was heartbroken, but not angry. On D-Day, September 12th, when I found out about the affair, I told her that if she wanted to be with the AP, she could go, but I'd at least like to change her tires to winter tires before she drove. Out to see him. It was cold. The roads were icy. Again, no anger. Just sadness and grief. So tell me, how controlling could I have possibly been if she got away with a 13-year and-off affair without being caught? That's where I'm at now. We're selling our house. I've resigned from my tenured position at the university I taught at. I've accepted a new role at a university in Southern Europe. My middle child is probably coming with me. My oldest has already moved out and started renting with friends. My youngest might come too, depending on how co-parenting plays out. I told all three of them that I'll always be just one flight away. I'll always keep a spare bedroom for them, and they're welcome to visit or live with me whenever they want. I'll happily pay for their flights, and, if needed, I'll upgrade to a bigger place. If my middle child is sure about coming, I'm planning to rent a 3-bedroom apartment. I'll also have friends visiting often. Honestly, I'm excited. I lived abroad as a kid. I think I'm finally done with Sweden for good. I'll be back for a while, but truthfully, I might never return. Right now, I'm training for the Stockholm Marathon, which is coming up in a month. Last year, I struggled through a painfully slow 4:23. This time, my only goal is to break 4 hours. My personal best is 3:32, but I'm nowhere near that shape right now. I'll happily settle for 3 hours, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds. I got some questions about my ex and our relationship. She's definitely working on herself now. It took her moving out to finally snap into reality, but by then, it was too late. I had already become emotionally detached. I wish her the best as the mother of my children, but that's about it. After she moved out, she begged for another chance and tried to re-engage me for months, but I always shut it down unless it had to do with the kids. She seems to have finally gotten the message, and since late last year, she hasn't brought up reconciliation again. I've been solo traveling a lot starting late 2022 and throughout 2023. I often take long weekends or week-long trips here and there. During those times, she stays at the house with our kids. It's amicable enough, but I gray rock her now. I don't ask about her life, and the kids and mutual friends know not to bring her up around me. I have no idea what a P or OBS are doing and couldn't care less. I never got an apology from a peanut that I expected one. I did call him once, just for 10 minutes. The point of that call was simple: to make sure he understood that if he ever inserted himself into my life again, he'd regret it. I'm taller, stronger, younger, fitter, and I used to practice martial arts. He knew he wouldn't stand a chance in a straight-up fight. I could hear the fear in his voice during that call. That was enough for me. I didn't need anything more. I got it out of my system. As for me, I tried online dating apps for a bit, but I quickly realized I'm nowhere near ready. I've got too much emotional baggage right now and zero desire to jump into anything new. I'm still dealing with depression and struggle with self-destructive thoughts almost daily, but I'm slowly getting better. I've always been popular with Southern European women, though, so maybe something natural will happen once I move. Must be the Viking look: tall, pretty fit, beard, tattoos. Honestly, I could probably make a living posing in Times Square, dressed as Thor for tourist photos. The kids know a rough version of what happened, but not the full details. I didn't want to force it on them or turn them against their mother. I told them that if they ever want to know more, I'll answer every question they have. They've all been in shock too. Of course, my ex asked for one last chance, but by that time, she'd already had hundreds of chances. I had none left to give. She begged me, but I just didn't care anymore. I'd reached that point of emotional numbness. Like I said before, our marriage was like a dead tree. No one realized it had died until spring came, and the leaves never grew back. That's how I felt. Just nothing. Empty, done. Far as I know, she's still single, and I don't think she'll ever talk to the AP again. If she does, that's her problem. My honest opinion of the guy: he's a steaming pile of garbage. He's 3 years older than me, can't hold a job, is an alcoholic, and just a complete loser. I'd honestly get a laugh out of seeing my ex try to build a real relationship with him. It'd serve her right, pure karma. I haven't heard a word about him or OBS since November 2021, and I don't care to. They divorced back in 2017, and judging by how OBS talked about him, I highly doubt they'll ever be together again. As for my family, I even need to say it? I do have a sister, but she's kept her distance from all this. Still, we talk less and less these days. I think she feels like she has to choose a side, and that's tough. I'm no contact with both of my parents, which means I haven't attended a single family event in over a year. No graduation parties, no weddings, no birthdays. Nothing. Because every branch of the extended family connects back to either my mom or dad. That's the cost, and I'll have to live with it. I'm trying to make some sort of peace with that now. At this point, I don't care if that bridge with my family burns. Deep down, I still hope I get an apology from my parents someday, but I've completely stopped giving a rat's ass about my brother. I've seen him for what he really is: a selfish, disloyal piece of crap. I always supported him, always defended him when people talked badly about him. And the one time I needed him to return the favor, he kicked me while I was already bleeding. That says everything. I don't talk to my ex anymore, except when it's about the kids. She used to try bringing up getting back together, but I shut it down every single time. She finally got the message. I think she honestly believed she could have it both ways, keep the stability of our family while sneaking off for her little fantasy life. She thought she could cheat forever and never face the consequences. She never stopped to think about what would happen if she got caught. Because in her mind, she never would get caught. But it was never really about the AP. It was about escaping real life. It was about having weekends where she could pretend to be a carefree 17-year-old again. No responsibility. No stress, just an illusion. Well, it's not my circus anymore. It's not my monkeys.